Oh, very good morning to all of those who are with us live here today, and for this final seventh session on karma and commitments. And to those of you joining on YouTube, then good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, and very warm welcome to you. So let's start today with our good motivation, having a big mind and a happy mind and a very, very loving, caring mind for all sentient beings. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on, until we reach the very heart of enlightenment, through the practice of generosity and all six transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well, live long, be healthy, be well provided for, have good friends, find respect, live in places of peace and plenty, and most of all, may they practice Dharma. And may they each create the causes for these things to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being that's totally beyond suffering. And may they attain the great equanimity, free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamavati shamita shatru Om kurimarajite karota keorite jovati Ollo yani bishudane male malapana ye kukure kaka grase grasana omuki paramuki amuki shamme davan savagraha bandhanam Nigrihitva savabhava pravadina vimukta marapasha savitva buddha mudra anudgatita savamare buddharita parishuddhe bhika shantu savamara kama. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our heads on lotus and moon seat, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So, as I was saying at the when we were having a chat in the introduction, then we're having a brief overview of now the various commitments that can help us along our Buddhist path. Beautiful tools. Commitment is, from a samsaric point of view, it's a scary thing. And because you have to, it's like promising to be good and do all the right things. And some bits of us get scared by that. But from, of course, the Buddhist point of view, this is beautiful support for our journey on this Buddhist path. So we had that in the very first talks about commitments, about being in the shade of the tree. And we've seen through Gampopa that there are 4 aspects to those commitments. We need to take them. They're taken as vows from a preceptor who holds a lineage and who has himself or herself kept those vows very properly. So we need to take them properly. We need to take them and keep them with the right motivation. That's the second thing. And then we must avoid breaking or damaging the vows. So we need to know what does that and to avoid it. And then if it's possible, if the vow has been broken, then we need to have the means to fix it. That's the 4th thing. So looking very globally at our Buddhist commitments, they're the 4 basic things we need to always have in mind. In terms of the last 2, breaking the vows or damaging them and then having the means to fix that when it's possible, then one thing I've not said yet that's quite useful and famous is that the vows we did first, which are the vows about not harming other beings, they're generally called pratimoksha vows. Prati means oneself, moksha means liberation. So pratimoksha means what free us, what liberate us. They liberate us from creating harmful karma that hurts others, and then through the power of karma eventually comes back to us. In the future as suffering. Sorry, I was thinking of a very nice cartoon I saw once of a line drawing of a man with a huge smile on his face, and he's pushing over quite a big rectangular column, a sort of Stonehenge type column, and he's pushing, and it's starting to fall over, and that's going to hit another one like dominoes. The next one's going to fall over and hit the next one. But what he can't see, and what we see because it's an aerial view, is that these columns are in a circle. So as it goes around, and the last one's going to fall on him. Karma's a bit like that. And as they say, what goes around comes around. So pratimoksha means that free us, liberating vows, and they're all about reducing, removing the harm to ourselves and others. They're mainly the precepts. So we saw lay precepts, but we can take as lay people, and monks and nuns precepts. The pratimoksha vows are compared to a clay pot, or I think these days we might say, rather than clay, a very expensive porcelain pot, like a very expensive Ming vase auctioned at Sotheby's, that you've got. And it says, if it's broken, it can't be fixed. These days we see in Japan, they fix things with gold and they make them even more beautiful. People share that a lot. It's only an example. It's a simple example. If it's a china clay pot and it falls and it's broken, that's finished. It says, compared to that, the bodhisattva vows and the Vajrayana vows are like a pot made of gold. So even if it falls and it gets dented, then if you have the skill, you can push it out, and it's just as good as it's ever been. It's not ruined forever. It can be totally repaired. The reason for this is that the pratimoksha vows, when we look carefully at those precepts for the ordained and the lay people, they're mainly about body and speech, and how our body or speech, both, can hurt other people, cause harmful karma, and come back to ourselves. So, whereas the bodhisattva vow, the Vajrayana vows, are about mind karma. They're based on our attitude. The fact of not hurting others is taken for granted. Of course, we're not going to hurt others or create bad karma, that's understood. But the main point of adding to our pratimoksha vows, the bodhisattva commitment, is about our own mind. And especially with the Vajrayana vows, then we can break the Vajrayana vow simply by the way we think. We break the bodhisattva vow because of the way we think, but then because of what we do, because of our thinking, what we don't do, what we avoid doing. But all of this is not simple. It's complicated, but it's to say that these vows of the mind, of one's attitude, of one's wishes to become enlightened for all beings, are not the same as the vows of body and speech, of pratimoksha, about the way we conduct ourselves in life in relation to the world around us and other beings. So last week we got through the main pratimoksha vows. We went on to the bodhisattva vow. We saw it was in two parts. One part is like novice bodhisattva vow. It's taking the aspiration where the only commitment we have in general is to do our very best to make our mind a bodhisattva mind. We don't have commitments related to action. It's all about attitude. We're learning how to think and react and relate like a bodhisattva. So we saw at the end of last week that we lose that aspiration if we exclude even one sentient being from our loving care. And if we do that, then we need to sort it out, purify our loss of our loving mind within, remember, 2 watches, 2 4-hour periods. So we've got 8 hours to fix that. Then also we can lose the bodhisattva vow, aspiration vow, through what are called the 4 dark actions. And I think last week I explained them and briefly the reasons behind them. So the 4 dark actions are to deceive one's teacher, or actually to try and deceive one's teacher. Whether they're actually deceived or not doesn't matter. It's the fact that in us, we're not being straightforward. Keep that one in mind for when we get to the end of today, if I manage to finish everything. The second dark action is to make somebody regret what isn't regrettable. If they've done a good action and we put doubts in their mind, make them regret what they did. The third one is to speak badly about another bodhisattva. So remember last time I talked about this suggestion of trying 1 month where not one word comes out of your mouth that's critical of any sentient being, and particularly those who've taken the bodhisattva vow. And then the 4th dark action is to try to deceive anybody. Why do we want to deceive them? It's always for selfish ends. So those also can cause us to lose our aspiration vow. So there's the aspiration vow, but then when we've trained in that enough and we feel ready, then we take the big step and take the practice vow, which is now I'm not just going to train to think like a bodhisattva, I'm actually going to commit my life to acting like a bodhisattva. So then we take the practice vow. And so that's commitment to the 6 paramitas. At the beginning of this session, we said, where is it? Here somewhere. Through the practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality to help sentient beings. It's the commitment to the 6 paramitas. So when we look at, okay, well, what's the small print? What do we actually need to do or not to do? Then there are rules and regulations for each one of the 6 paramitas. We don't have time to go through them today. If you want to check them out, this book, Perfect Conduct, you'll find them all in there. But there are 4 root commitments for the bodhisattva practice vow. It's the same idea. If you do one of these things, then the rest of it could look like you are practicing the 6 paramitas. You could be looking very generous. You could be seeming the very right conductful. So you look like a good monk, good nun, from the outside. The best. Very, very good. And so on. You could seem forbearing. You could seem to be very diligent, very persevering, very full of Dharma energy, doing a lot of meditation. But they have 4 root losses of mentality, which means you have lost your commitment, even if the outer expression of what you're doing is okay looking. So the first one is through ego, to praise yourself or to put others down. Praise oneself, put others down. So that's through its attachment to oneself, the need for territory and all the fear that goes with it and so on. It's an ancient samsaric thing of wanting to look good. And so this is what do I want to say? What am I scared of saying? Ken is thinking. Now this, you know this expression, catch-22? I can't say what I want to say, because if I say what I want to say, I'll be doing what I say is wrong. So I tell you what I wanted to say, but I won't say. Okay, so that you know. Okay, there's all sorts of lamas. There are some who are pretty much wonderful bodhisattvas, almost Buddhas. And then there is everything down to those who have qualified to teach. They know the Dharma material. Sometimes they know it very, very well, know the subject matter, or they've done a retreat, 2 retreats, whatever it is. But I've known some who, when you come out of the session, at the end of the session, you've got the feeling that only they've really understood the Buddha's teaching. They've got it so well understood. And then sometimes they imply that lots of other lamas haven't. I see this on social media, on Facebook. I'm always suspicious when it looks like almost like the lama, the Rinpoche, or the person who's teaching, or who's quoted on Facebook, It's almost like they understood Buddhism better than the Buddha himself. They've got a modern, very insightful, psychological, makes a lot of sense explanation. And the feeling is, and this is how I am. I'm wise, I embody this. It's very liberated. And often critical. There's often a lot of criticism in it. So, of course, what I'm saying now is criticizing some lamas. But the thing is, if I was saying that to put myself as I know better than them, then that would be a big mistake. And I hope I'm not doing that. But to raise yourself in any way, it doesn't have to be obvious. It's behind the scenes, but the way people emerge from what you've done, what you've said, it puts you up and others down. So doing that or seeming to practice the paramitas, seeming to be very diligent, for instance, or seeming to do doing a lot of meditation, but to make yourself look good and to make others not look so good can happen. And then even though you're doing the 6 paramita practice, you've lost the vow, so the practice doesn't count at all for your liberation. It counts for your samsara, because what's behind it is ego. Hope that's clear. That's the first one, through pride. The second one is through avarice, and it means we don't help others when we could. And we don't give them Dharma teachings when we could. Somehow it's in our own interest. Not to give financially, not to give our time. So somebody needs help, but it's going to take an hour or 2, and you'd rather go and watch the latest movie. So you make an excuse, that kind of thing. Which can be quite complicated. Somebody needs your help, but then you want to do your Dharma practice. What do? Say, sorry, I can't come. I've got to do my prostrations. But then do you neglect your practice commitments? Or, I don't know. But if behind this there is ego and clinging, avarice, you want something for yourself, then you've lost the bodhisattva activity. We try and be as kind and as reasonable as we can. For instance, I have, a few people I'm in touch with, they're quite suicidal. And when they get in touch, they're desperate. And you can't just say, can we talk next Thursday? When sometimes they've got the pills in their hand and they say, I can't take it anymore. And you're going to be an hour or 2 on the phone. And so there are very real situation. We don't have a lot of time. There are demands on our time. So what we're looking at, we have to learn to be clearer and clearer about, more insightful about, is our own motivation behind what we're doing or getting out of doing. The third one's through hostility, anger, rejection, and this is harming somebody. So we are bodhisattvas, And then now we've taken the practice vow, but we're not Buddhas overnight. We'll get it wrong. Sometimes we might lose our temper. Sometimes we might say something hurtful. So here, it's when through anger something has gone wrong, we've hurt somebody, and we don't do everything we can to put it right. And so then the fourth thing is teaching inappropriately. And this is teaching the wrong thing to the right people or the right thing to the wrong people. So, for instance, even though the teachings on shunyata are so true, they are not suitable for everybody. And some people, they might frighten. Other people, they may create a blockage that takes them away from Dharma. So we need to know when we look at the instructions on teaching in the parameter of generosity, we need to find the right time, the right place, teach the right thing to the right people, then it's okay. So the right thing is shunyata, it's a good thing to teach, but to the wrong people, they're not ready for it. It would actually make a reaction, a bad reaction to Dharma. And then the wrong thing to the right people can be, there's a whole range of stuff. So to teach wrongly, in the book Right Conduct, there's quite a few sections on this, into the detail. So they're the four basic things. They're related to the mind poison. Basically, if the mind is poisoned, but there's an appearance of practice, then it's not practice, it's not bodhisattva practice. And then for each of the 6 paramita, you have precise guidelines. When you are being generous, then do this, don't do that. If you do that, it breaks it. If you do this, it damages it. And so we go through each paramita because they deal with very different areas of our life and our Dharma practice. More generally, so we've got aspiration, bodhicitta vow, practice bodhicitta vow. If we've lost the aspiration vow, excluded a sentient being, 4 dark actions, then all the time that that's lost and not fixed, our bodhisattva practice is not bodhisattva practice. No matter what you're doing, how technically well you're doing it, if your aspiration, your mind, has got something wrong and not fixed it, then your practice doesn't qualify for taking you to enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And in terms of karma, it takes all the power out of your bodhisattva practice. Now, while we're here in the paramita, then those of you who did some of the other courses about the 6 paramita and the bodhisattva path and bodhicitta, you'll know the meaning of paramita means what takes us beyond. And this is very relevant to this course, which is about karma, what we're doing. Karma means what we're doing with body, speech, and mind, and where it's taking us. Is it taking us to samsara, or is it taking us out of samsara? So in Mahayana, the word paramita means far shore. Often translated as other shore, which I don't like, because the other shore means you're on one shore, there's a far shore, and there's some water in between. That's the word shore, means there's water. We are not on a shore. We are not stable and okay. We're in the water. Okay. We're in the waters, the ocean of samsara. It's not as though we're here safe and sound in samsara on an island, and there's the water of Dharma, and we need to then practice Dharma to get to the other shore, which is enlightenment. We're in the water. So paramita means the far shore, the shore over there. So when we take refuge, that's like finding a boat. So different. Being in the water where you have to swim, float, manage, and all of a sudden there's a boat, even a tiny boat. And if you climb into it, what a difference. If you're not wet, you can dry out. There'll be oars, there'll be a sail. You can really be well equipped to go the distance. I have a friend, he went round the world in a sailboat. Norway, round the world in a boat. And you couldn't swim around the world, if you're still in the water. You can't eat unless you're going to dive down and eat a fish or something like that. So a boat is already a big difference. So anyway, this word paramita means far shore. And what we saw is, whether it's generosity, right conduct, forbearance, diligence, meditation, or wisdom training, the actual details that we study of how to be generous, how to practice right conduct, as we've seen last week in this, and so on, normally would take us to a better samsara, which means we create causes, good causes. There will be healthy results, but they won't last forever. And samsara, you need to make a lot and a lot and a lot of good causes all the time to keep yourself out of states of suffering. It never ends. It could never end. So even though we are practicing right conduct, we've seen this gives us a good human body. Generosity gives us good circumstances. You remember the example of a dog that's in a better situation than humans. It's got more to eat, regular food, medical care, loving companions, safe place to sleep and eat. Some dogs are so much better off than humans, but they're dogs. So result of generosity is good circumstances. The result of right conduct is a human rebirth. And the results of diligence and so on, they're each very specific. So if we practice those qualities in all their details as best we can and keep vows, pratimoksha vows, and details of the bodhisattva vow, then they would lead to a temporary result in samsara. So when we talk about paramita, it's within each second of our karma as a bodhisattva, then the way we are doing what we're doing is actually taking us out of the samsaric process. It's so different. It's so totally different from just right conduct, good conduct. It's liberating conduct. And we only use the term in Mahayana paramita when the liberating conduct is there. And so it needs two factors. I can only talk about them briefly in this course. In other courses, we look more. What you're doing needs to be made great and needs to be made pure. It needs to be made great in three ways, and the purity is because of two things. These apply to all of the 6 paramitas. So greatness has 3 aspects. There's greatness in a qualitative way, which means that the action is as noble and as pure as it can be. If you think of gold, very pure gold, noble metal. So in the moments of our 6 paramitas of practicing generosity, keeping the vows, then we have the first of the 3 is a mind that is non-dual. Actually, it says beyond triplicity. So we are practicing right conduct, in this case, without a mind of subject, me keeping the vows, object, whatever it is, the reason for keeping the vows, relationship with other people and so on, object, and interaction, the actual conduct, how we conduct ourselves. So although we are, for instance, I am not killing another being, I, other, even though we're meticulously keeping that right action, we're not thinking, I'm not a killer, and so on and so on. There is an awakened, mainly through meditation and wisdom advice, we know, we've learned through meditation to be in a place beyond subject, object, and action. So then through that, that's one factor that makes our action in that moment paramita. The quality is pure because it is non-dual, no I and other. The second one is quantitative, and so the first one that we had non-dual, that's because of what we call wisdom as jhana, primordial wisdom. The second one is because of wisdom as prajna, which is more general wisdom, and it means that as we are doing the action, so let's say that, I'm giving you something. I put a story on Facebook yesterday, a memory from the time of the 16th Karmapa. One thing he used to do was to give people money. It wasn't a lot of money, it would depend what he had, if there was coins around. But his mindset, he didn't say it, but I'm sure this was it. He'd give you like a pound coin. But his thinking would be, I give you this, but now, from now on, in all your future lives, may you receive all the wealth you need to practice Dharma. And not only you, but I'm giving you just now, but I'd like to, I give at the same time in my mind all sentient beings, all the resources they need. So through praja, you make a small action endless, because you're thinking of all sentient beings and all the things you can do. I suppose the biggest example is when we take our first sip of a cup of coffee or tea. So in reality, the coffee is just going into your own body and making you nourished. But we are thinking, if only I could give drink to all of those who are thirsty. If only I could give drink and nourishment to all of those who are hungry and thirsty. If only all of the hungry ghosts could benefit. So as I'm enjoying this coffee, may their suffering be relieved. And then not just now, but from now until enlightenment, through hundreds, thousands, millions of such actions. So just a tiny sip of coffee becomes endless in its scope and makes huge karma. And we can do that with almost anything, every moment of the day. So when we do preliminary practices, Mundro, then when we get to mandala offering and Guru Yoga, we learn how to make every moment of our day deeply meaningful, like this. So through jhana, it's non-dual. Through prajna, it's vast. And then through dedication, when we've finished doing something good, then we dedicate it forever to all sentient beings. So that makes the consequences not dry up. Instead, it's like putting a drop of water in the ocean. The consequences will be with us all the way up to our enlightenment. So these three things, prajna, jhana, dedication, make the action great. And then we also need to make the action pure. And we make it pure by combining wisdom and compassion. Wisdom means placing the four seals of shunyata, voidness, emptiness, on the action, where the doer has no lasting self and the action has no lasting self, and then the receiver, and then the end product, enlightenment, while we're doing it, whichever parameter it is. We recognize the voidness, the interdependence of all of those. So there are the four seals of shunyata, and then best compassion, which is unconditional, great compassion. So by combining those, wisdom and compassion, we make it very pure. Our compassionate heart makes it pure. The wisdom of voidness makes it pure. So only then will an instant of right conduct be the paramita of right conduct. But if you get it all right, you might not need many instants of that for your mind to be changed amazingly. It's what we're aiming for. It's why we meditate. It's why we receive teachings. We're learning to make action, paramita, something that takes us out of the stream of consciousness and awakens our natural Buddha nature, our innate Buddha nature. So it's not directly in these teachings on right conduct, but because part of right conduct for the bodhisattva is the practice vow of the bodhisattva, and that is dedication to the six paramitas. We do need to know what the paramitas mean. So now I think I need, so I don't get fired from my job, to go back to Gampopa's chapter on right conduct. Now, he showed there are three areas of right conduct. The right conduct of vows, that's what we've been looking at mainly until now, the right conduct of vows. And mainly vows for avoiding harm. Secondly, the right conduct of amassing virtue. Nice word, amassing. We are quite good at amassing things. If ever you visit this place here, it's so amassed, it's ridiculous. There are some outbuildings that I converted. They were water tanks that filled up with water in the winter and gave water in the summer in the garden. I turned them into storage places. So my mother-in-law, stuff from two other properties, ended up here. My stuff from our Paris flat ended up here. About 60 years worth of accumulated ordinary stuff ended up here. There is so much stuff, so much. And I remember for years there was one garage where you lifted the lid, the door, and it was packed everywhere. And I thought, I'm going to do something about it, but I can't face it. So you'd shut the door again and think, next month or this winter. For years, it stayed like that until one year I couldn't take it anymore. So I got rid of half of it, not all of it. Anyway, we're very good at amassing stuff. In Dharma, we want to amass virtue. Really amass it, build it up, lots and lots, as much as possible. So how do we do that? And remember, the next section we're going to come to is about right conduct as benefiting others. So of course, virtue is benefiting others, but here we look at virtue primarily as not what we're doing to help others, but what we're doing to improve our own journey, our own lives in terms of Dharma. So we get a list. It's a wonderful list. It comes from a text called the Bodhisattva Levels. The following is to be understood as being the bodhisattva right conduct of amassing virtue. So relying upon and abiding within the bodhisattva's right conduct, so that means keeping the vows I talked about earlier. It's to apply oneself enthusiastically, remember that word, to study, to contemplation, and meditation. So the 3 steps of wisdom. And to remain in solitude whenever we can, to get quality time of retreat, to practice, to study. It is to respect teachers and to serve them, and to serve and care for the sick and the poor and the helpless. It is to give excellently and to proclaim only the good qualities of others. It's to appreciate the attributes of others and to be forbearing with those who are scornful of you. It's to dedicate every virtue to enlightenment and to make earnest prayers for enlightenment. It's to make offerings to the 3 most precious refuges and to strive to be diligent, to be ever caring and careful, to be mindful of the training, and through awareness to keep to the training, to guard the doors of one's senses, and to know how much one should consume. Not to sleep in the first and last parts of the night, but to persevere in joining one's mind with what is wholesome. To rely on holy beings and Dharma teachers, and to authentically examine one's own delusions, to face them, to admit them, and get rid of them. These sort of dharmas need to be practiced, nurtured, and brought to their maturity. So it's a wonderful list of guidelines, things to do, and these are mainly to, it does include some things about helping the poor, helping the sick and the needy, of course, but we're mainly looking at here at making one's own mind, one's own being, virtuous. Then the third area, right conduct as work for the welfare of others. It says in brief, and this is from the same text, the Bodhisattva Levels, 13 main aspects. First one's very interesting because it says to support those who are doing worthwhile activities. So beside doing what we can to help others, part of what we can do is to help others. And when we look at how the mind works and how karma works, this one's a real bonus, let's say. It's like in shops, you buy one, get one free. Then you when we call rejoice in the goodness of others. So by supporting others' kind works, helpful works, then we get the karma. If we're 100%, how can you say, invested in it, believing in it, we feel as though almost like we did it, even though we only supported it a bit, then we get the good karma as though we had done it ourselves. So, in the second one, to remove the sufferings of beings in torment. Third one, to teach those who lack skill how to cope intelligently. So helping people develop whatever skills it may be so that they can live a better life, handle their lives better. And especially psychologically, to help people discover the skills whereby they can manage their lives better. Number 4, to be grateful, to appreciate the good that's been done to us and to benefit in return. So not necessarily benefiting those who helped us. Sometimes we can't do that. The person who helped me the most in this life died very young. I always wanted to pay back. Never had the opportunity for that person, but of course you can pass it on. So I tried to help other people, like with the kindness and generosity that person helped me. So being grateful is very, very important in this list. To protect beings from what frightens them. Number 5. Number 6, to remove the distress of those who are suffering. It's a bit different from number 2. Number 2 is removing the sufferings. Number 6 is more psychological, removing the distress of those who are suffering. Number 7, to provide the needy with whatever they lack. Number 8, so now up to there, we've got right conduct for bodhisattvas who are on the earlier stages of the path. The next ones, they're for teachers. So to very properly bring together a Dharma following. So when the time's right and you've got something to give, then to bring together the followers. Number 9, to engage each of them in what really corresponds to their needs, their aptitudes. Number 10, to make them happy through the very finest of qualities. So this means that you, as a teacher, must be a shining example and what they call it, walking the talk, isn't it? You must be not just saying you should do this, but you should be a shining example of doing it yourself. Very difficult. And then number 11, still further, it just says to excellently annihilate whatever needs removing. But this means to work with your students, really finding what the problem is, their main problem, main obstacles, and to work skillfully to help them get rid of them. Number 12, to inspire awe through exceptional abilities. So this is when you have the power to perform miracles. They'll come one day, and then from time to time the odd miracle may be very helpful to remind people that we are on this extraordinary path. It's not just about being a good human being. This world is so primitive, and there's just so much more. So anyway, Then number 13 is to make people long for what is good and wholesome, to inspire them to the good. So there we've looked at 3 areas: how we avoid the harm through vows, how we create a virtuous being in ourselves, and specifically how we help others in general, and then specifically the best help is the help of a Dharma teacher, because that goes to the heart of the matter. It gives people forever skills. If you feed the hungry, they're hungry again within 24 hours. If you clothe somebody, it doesn't last for a whole lifetime. If you give somebody Dharma and they practice it and learn it and take it into themselves, it's theirs forever. So different. So then we get then we become very practical. Now, after being up in the theory of the paramitas and so on, right conduct, how should Buddhists conduct themselves physically, speech, and mind? Physically, avoid unnecessary and wild behavior, running, jumping, and so forth. Purity means to remain relaxed and smooth, with a kind expression on one's face. Then there's a quote, "Therefore be self-controlled and always have a smiling face." Get completely rid of that constant frown and those dark looks. Become a friend to beings and be sincere towards them. So then it asks the question, how should we look at others? When looking at others, by knowing that it is through them that you will become Buddha, look at them in a pleasant, kind way. Now, this may have to be, this is Ken's comment, with your inner eyes. These days, going around looking too kindly and lovingly at people might get you into a lot of trouble. So it means the way we look at them is just as it says, we know that through other beings, either those who need help, they're in poor circumstances, or those who are nasty to us or whatever, it's through them that our mind will become liberated, because we have to handle our mind. And they are vital in that process. So it's with gratitude, it's with love, it's very pleasant. It's not, as it says, get rid of those dark looks where you don't like this one and all that kind of thing. How should one sit? One should not sit with legs outstretched or fidget with the hands. So it's about our effect on other people when they see you. And also some of this is Oriental, directing your legs towards somebody, your feet, is very insulting. It's to do with body energies. And how should one eat? It sounds like mother's advice. One should not eat with an overfull mouth, noisily, or with the mouth gaping. How should one move around? One should not be noisy and hasty when doing things like getting up from one's chair. Neither should one slam doors. One should take pleasure in being quiet. So there's one text, it says, the thief, the cat, and the yogi benefit from being quiet. So the thief is passing aperçu, goes by unnoticed. This is all very serious. I've got time for 2-minute diversion. You probably didn't read William Burroughs, but William Burroughs wrote one bit about the raincoat thief. So these people, they go into quite a big restaurant, ordinary restaurant, not too posh, where people, when it's cold weather, rainy weather, they go in, they hung up their raincoat on the hook So you go in with a dirty old raincoat that you got from somewhere, you hang it up on the hook, you go and visit the bathroom, the toilet, and then you come out and you go to where the coats are hung up, and you take the best coat and you put it on and you go. And so explaining how you get away with that is an exercise in visualization. Because when people say, did anybody see the guy who came in? They say, oh yeah, there was somebody. Was he big? Was he short? Can't remember. Old? Young? Can't remember. It just goes by. Nobody can ever remember. And so what the thief does is you visualize you are a ham sandwich. Sorry, apologies to vegans and vegetarians, but like the most ordinary 2 slices of white bread, a lousy slice of ham and a little bit of butter, something that nobody will ever take any notice of. So visualizing that you're a ham sandwich, you go in, you hang up your raincoat, you go to the bathroom, you come out, you take another one, and you walk away. And the fact that you projected ham sandwich means nobody ever remembers you. So this is nothing to do with Gampopa's teaching. This is just to give us a little break in a serious, very serious talk about right conduct. But for the thief, for the cat, and for the yogi, being quiet and unnoticed is a very good quality. And then, how should one sleep? It says, in whichever direction one prefers. So sometimes if we've got a choice, then it can be in north, south, east, west, depending on where our guru is, depending on the directions of the Dhyani Buddhas and so on. So that's up to you. And it says, ideally, one sleeps in the posture of the Buddha when he passed into nirvana. So we sleep on the right side with the hand under the right cheek, right hand under the right cheek, left hand on the left thigh. And then in Vajrayana, we get more instructions about what we visualize above our heads and so on. That's about physical conduct. For speech, it says give up excessive speech or harsh speech. And we get quotes from the scriptures. It says, if one's speech is preoccupied with the faults of other bodhisattvas, enlightenment recedes far into the distance. If one talks through jealousy, enlightenment recedes far into the distance. So we're very mindful of our speech and say only good, helpful, necessary, positive things. So it says, how should one speak? When speaking, one's words should be meaningful to listen to, clearly expressed, beautifully chosen, liberated from self-involvement and aversion, smooth, and in just the right amount. And then with our mind, there's a quote. It says, Maitreya, Buddha talking to Maitreya, a bodhisattva should examine how gaining prestige and being honored gives rise to desire and attachment. He should know how gaining prestige and being honored gives rise to anger and aversion. He should know how prestige and honors give rise to confused ignorance. He should know how gaining prestige and being honored gives rise to deviousness. He should consider how none of the Buddhas ever encouraged prestige or being given honors, and he should examine how prestige and honors steal one's roots of virtue. He should consider how prestige and honors are like a prostitute trying to seduce her client, and so on. Now the point of this is, maybe when we start out being a bodhisattva, we don't get that much honor from other people, or we don't have that much fame and prestige. if you're really going to follow this path, if you're going to become a pure, kind being, but more than that, you have Dharma qualities, Dharma knowledge, you should become a Dharma teacher, then how did you become so pure? And you got rid of desire, you got rid of anger, the obvious things, but pride is very, very subtle. And pride, and because now you have qualities, now you stand out from the others, then the big, big trap to be mindful of is looking for, just like it says here, honor, looking for status. A very, very good story of, it's one that's often told when we're in the right conduct section. Geshe Ben, there's lots of Geshe Ben stories. Geshe Ben spent a lot of time in retreat in a cave. Of course, if you're in retreat in the cave, usually means people are supplying food and the basics so that you can carry on being in retreat. So one day it was arranged that his patrons would come and see him. And the night before he thought, oh gosh, I've been meditating in here for months. The place is a tip. It's like, it looks really terrible. And so he probably didn't have very much, but he tidied up things, especially his shrine, and made everything very, very nice. Then the next day when they were due to come, he thought, what a hypocrite. I want these people to think something about me that's not true. I've been living in rubbish for the last couple of months. So he took the ashes from his fire and he threw them over everything, especially over the shrine, which normally, of course, you'd never do. When the patrons were let in and they looked around, what? And then he explained to them what he'd done and why he'd done it. And it's because he was looking for their respect, prestige, and honor. That's the main thing that's pointed out with the mind. And another one is the fault of enjoying sleep. Whoever comes to enjoy sleep and inertia will suffer considerable degradation in their understanding, and their mental capacity will deteriorate too. Whatever arises through wisdom will be constantly impaired. The understanding of one who comes to enjoy sleep and inertia will disintegrate. That person will become prey to non-human forces and be harmed by them when meditating alone in the forest and so on. So that's the things to avoid with the mind, and then with the positive ones, to maintain faith. So that was a quick dip into Gampopa. Now we've done something about Pratimoksha vows, something about Bodhisattva vow. Then there are Vajrayana vows. The Vajrayana vows, they're usually often referred to as samaya. Sorry, I was just looking, something flashed on my screen. Then it says should only be explained to those who've received empowerment and not in public. So I can't really say much except in general what we're talking about, and then in the support document, because you'll see these all over the place, it's not secret anymore. You'll find the 14 root samaya for somebody practicing Vajrayana. But what we need to know is the origin, I think I mentioned it last time already, of Vajrayana, and that is people, in fact, it wasn't in this course, it's another one, people who had left worldly life, had left the monasteries, and they were mostly, here we're talking about Vajrayana until about the 5th century of our era, 5th, 6th century. Until that time, Vajrayana wasn't in the monasteries. In the monasteries, there was general Buddhist teaching, Mahayana teachings, Vajrayana was only given by gurus in their own ashrams, often in remote places, forests, mountain hermitages. But the general monasteries, and there were some huge monasteries in India, did not have Vajrayana practice or theory in them. It was very secret. So you had to leave the world and leave monasteries. And then when you went to your guru, mostly you stayed there and you were 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every week of the year, there practicing with the guru. A very intense liberation of everything which is our mind, all of our habit patterns, thought patterns, emotional patterns, desire, anger, all of those things needed to be dealt with, fast-tracked through Vajrayana practice, mainly through Yidam practice, visualization, yoga work with channels and energies, and then deep mind teachings. So essential to all of that is the bond between the teacher and the disciple. We find this in psychotherapy a little bit. The teacher or the therapist is going to take people into their history, into their minds. It will bring up stuff, and it can be very difficult to deal with. There will be blockages. Often there's a reaction against the therapist for taking one into those darker areas of oneself that need to be dealt with. So the Dharma path, the intense path of Tantra, of Vajrayana, requires absolute maintaining purity of trust in the teacher. This is why it says before you even start, the teacher needs to be right, the disciple needs to be right. And it's only when both are qualified, suitable for the Vajrayana process, that then the process should begin. So all of the Vajrayana vows are around keeping purity of view with regard to the teacher, but also to one's Dharma brothers and sisters, which become dearer than one's own flesh and blood. And one's very careful to respect them, help them. You would die to help them if that was necessary on their path. You see how valuable these teachings are, how hard it is to practice them, and we give every possible support to each other to keep us on the path when all the problems arise. The old angers come up, the old karmas come up, the old desires come up, and so on. So all of the samaya is designed for that, just like pratimoksha is all designed to stop us hurting other beings. And bodhisattva vow are designed to bring out the loving heart dedicated to the truth of enlightenment. Then the Vajrayana vows, which include the pratimoksha vows and the bodhisattva vows, taken for granted, now is about this very special circumstance of working with a guru. So that's how it started. And then that got, how can you say, I don't want to say diluted, but I'm thinking diluted when Vajrayana went into the monasteries. And then today, empowerments are given and so on, not at all in the way that it was given when all of this started. It's helpful. People receive empowerments, they do the practice, but they're not 24/7 with their guru. And the Vajrayana samayas are very hard to keep. Like the golden pot, if they're broken, we can fix them. But one needs to know how and how quickly they need to be fixed, and so on and so on. So in the Vajrayana teachings, there's a lot, and it varies from level of Tantra to level of Tantra. From each Tantra within one level to another one, there are specific samayas, and you should receive them when you get the transmission of that particular practice. So we have the 14. I've given you the list. I don't know if it's worth me just reading the list because you've got it, but I'll read them anyway. So 14, and we don't have time to go into the details, and it's not appropriate that I explain the details. The first one, disrespecting the Vajra master. The second one, transgressing the commands of the Buddha. Third one, insulting one's Vajra brothers and sisters. Fourth one, abandoning love for sentient beings. Fifth one, abandoning bodhicitta as either aspiration or practice. Sixth one, criticizing the teachings of other levels of Buddhism, sutras, or other tantras. Number 7, revealing secrets to those who are not ready for them. Number 8, mistreating one's own body. Number 9, rejecting voidness, shunyata. Number 10, keeping bad company. Number 11, failing to reflect on shunyata. Number 12, upsetting the minds of those who have faith in the teachings. So that's 12. Number 13, failing to observe the particular samaya commitments of a practice. So very often when we're given a practice, then we take a promise to do it every day or so many times a day or every so often. And that's very, very deep promise, important one. And number 14, denigrating women. So we're almost at the end of this course and just minutes away. And when we look back, we looked at karma, which is just the natural way, according to Buddha, that things work. Why are we who we are? Why is what's happening to me, not to anybody else? Why is it happening to them, in that country, in that circumstance? We explain most things through karma. Then because of karma, cause and effect, then we have a code of conduct. We're talking about conduct, whereby we want our own karma generation to be something that doesn't hurt others. It doesn't hurt us because we're making bad karma for ourselves. But more than that, we want to generate virtue and goodness through the basic path of Dharma, through the bodhisattva path, through the Vajrayana path. And we want to really benefit other beings. The way we need to do that is backed up by a very sacred commitment, and it becomes sacred because we receive it through a ceremony very properly. We learn what is our right mind attitude when we receive vows and precepts and commitments, how to receive them in the right way and how to maintain them afterwards with the right mind. We learn what to avoid because it could break or damage our commitment. And then we learn how we can fix, when that's possible, the mistakes we make as we go along. Having gone very briefly with an overview of an incredibly vast topic, then we'll end with a Milarepa masterclass. So all of those, the vows, commitments, all the stuff about bodhisattva, the 6 paramita, Vajrayana, samaya, and so on. So there's a story, it's not a very nice story. It's of 2 scholars who were very much into Buddhist study, very learned, Loten and Dalo. And Milarepa had become very popular, and they thought he was very unlearned, just a ragged yogi who'd done meditation. But I think they were seeing their customers go more and more to Milarepa and to take less notice of themselves. And so they thought they needed to show that he didn't know much Dharma. So they went to see him a couple of times, tried to get him to engage in debate, logical talk about the Buddha's teachings, including the six paramita and so on. And one of them, in the end, saw the value of Milarepa. The other one didn't. He had a catastrophic karma. So anyway, at one point, they've been asking Milarepa a few times to talk about the six paramita, and he's teasing them a lot about their own Dharma path. But then in the end, he gives these 6 lines, one for each paramita, where really he puts his finger on the very essence of each paramita. So now this course is about right conduct and Shila in Sanskrit, Sultim in Tibetan. So he says there is no other Shila, no other Sultim, no other right conduct beyond ending deception and cunning. That's it. And the scholars who'd studied all these things that I didn't have time to go into about right conduct realized that he put his finger on it. It's so deep. It's a masterclass. We need to have understood conduct. What are we doing with our body, our speech, our mind? Every day, each moment. How do we react and relate to this person, that person? How are we setting ourselves up, defining ourselves, the whole way we conduct ourselves? And so our main journey, our main purpose, is to get rid of ego, harmful ego that again and again in the past has spoiled us. And this is it. Ego is tricky. Ego, your mind can tell you very convincing stories. But it's always got a background agenda. We say one thing, we look like one thing, but behind the scenes, there's a self-centered agenda. We are using other people. We are using our life, our status. And so a real yogi is totally honest and straightforward. There's no stuff behind the scenes. They're what computer people used to call WYSIWYG. And what you see is what you get. They really are on the outside like they are on the inside. There's no show anymore. No pretense to the world, no pretense to other people. Your mind is Dharma. That's something more to think about than for me to explain. Words can't explain it, but I think as the years go by, then more and more we see how Milarepa's words are it, because the more you meditate, the more you're mindful of your mind and the thoughts behind the thoughts, and the subtle motivations behind all of that make you conduct yourself, do what you do. We become more aware of the deviousness and the need to cut through and be honest, even if it makes us not look so good. There's a need for honesty. And then as that develops into non-duality, shunyata, and these high states of mind and deity presence, then we let Chinrezig or Tara speak through us rather than our ego to get in the way. So there are many depths to Milarepa's teaching, and just because of the blessing, I'd like to Can't say sing because it's only 2 lines. You can't really sing 2 lines, but anyway, what Milarepa said. Yo ju pangwe parona sultem chawa lo name. That's it. So thank you very much for this course, attending, listening, and I really hope that we have better karma afterwards and that our conduct is wonderful. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained. By the main enemy, our mind's defilements, being completely defeated. And through that may each and every sentient being become freed from the ocean of existence, troubled by the waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. May its development know no setbacks, and may it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. Thank you.
I'll begin, Ken, by thanking you on behalf of everybody, I presume, for this course. It's been tremendous. It's covered a lot, and I certainly have forgotten all of it already. Perhaps others have, but the background notes would be very good reading to remind ourselves what we've forgotten. During this one, you referred to the catch-22 when you were trying to carefully steer a conversation between those teachers who, for want of a better word, may be truly genuine, and those who perhaps maybe not so genuine. And the word I began to think about those teachers who I've met in both categories, or in my estimation are in both categories. And the word that came to mind that defined or it highlighted the first ones is, and I particularly Akong Rinpoche comes to mind, but also the Dalai Lama and Tai Si Tupa, Gyaltsapa, etc. And that word is humility. The true teachers or great teachers always have just great humility.
I agree.
Good.
I agree. Certainly with what happens in public. In private, I think sometimes the teacher needs to show just how much better they are than you to help us to become humble. So sometimes they need to show that they are Buddha or that they are beyond. But that's in private. But I think in public, that's beautiful quality. Yeah, I agree. But sometimes it's tricky. And of course I correct my thoughts, but sometimes I suddenly caught myself thinking, this Lama telling us about non-ego has got the biggest ego in the room. Which of course is probably my own projection. And I confess, and I'm sorry for saying that, but sometimes it can really.
Ken, I have a question about the Vajrayana vow, the last one being not to denigrate women.
Yeah.
I'm having discussions because I'm studying a different text, and the whole issue around how women are perceived in Buddhism has come up. So that's why I'm drawn to that one. Are you able to expand a little upon why that's included and what it means in this regard?
A little bit. Because when these things evolved, as I said, Vajrayana was as it was then, and there wasn't a lot written down because it was gurus in remote places with their students of direct teaching, most of it done by heart, very little put into texts. And so why? We have some explanations, but I think it would be presumptuous of me to say definitely because at the time. So in the cultures of the time, women had a lousy, they were in second place, as almost all over the world, but certainly in India at the time of the early Buddhism. And then in many of the teachings on rebirth, then it was taught that it wasn't good to be reborn as a woman. And if you look at the social circumstances, you can understand why, especially because a spiritual life was mainly confined to men. Women didn't have a spiritual option in general, apart from all the other inconveniences of their role in society. And so, because the Vajrayana teachings are rooted in the Buddha nature teachings, in the Buddha nature teachings we are all of equal value. There's no difference between male or female, race, color, caste, anything. We have a mind there. We are all Buddhas in the making. So to see that, and it was to help people go beyond the inherited cultural mindset of looking down on women. But then more than that, in the Tantras, it does say that men and women are different, their lives are different, and that actually women very often have a greater potential for spiritual progress than men. Of course, it's very impossible to generalize, but in that sort of a way, it's as if a woman turns her life to spirituality, then given so much that's in a female nature. But then there's an extra thing to it, and I've not seen much about that, but I've seen some translated writings. And there, this is very specific, and we find it in the life of Tilopa, for instance, is that of the various Vajrayana masters, in the generic sense, male masters, female masters or mistresses, that doesn't quite sound right, but anyway, masters, Dharma masters, at the time of Tilopa, then there were some female masters, and they were considered the most powerful. And so when Tilopa went to what's now the Swat Valley in Pakistan, it's called Udiyana, there were very famous female teachers living in very difficult to access places, and who could bring enlightenment very quickly because they were so powerful and straightforward. Can you say? It was scary because there was no messing about. When we saw Milarepa about being straightforward and honest, there's no way you could fake your way through it. So in all the rest of India, monasteries, ashrams, and everything, there were teachers, gurus of all sorts of things. But if you wanted to be really put in the front of the mirror of enlightenment, these yoginis were very famous, and only the most brave and longing for quick enlightenment masters will go to them. So if you read into Lopa's story, his journey to meet the Janadakini in Udayana, it's beautiful, powerful. So I think for various reasons, then certainly not to look down in one's mind or to say anything denigrating about women was very important for the mind progress of those practicing Vajrayana. But more than that, it was to see them not just as the same, but perhaps potentially as even more powerful and gifted than the men.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'd like to say hello before saying goodbye to those I didn't get to say hello to at the beginning. You can see a few. Anybody like to add anything?
Just another thank you, really.
Oh, very welcome.
I'd like to thank you very much just before we go.
Oh, thanks, Kim.
Yes, thanks, Ken. It's been really useful, quite a powerful ending I've found today. And among other things, reflecting on this, even though some of these are topics that we've looked at before in the past, it's kind of highlighted to me for myself just how much of a challenge even some of these basic things are. And it's making me think a lot about my own position and what I feel is kind of feasible for me at this stage of my life, and where I am just now, what I can realistically try and do, and what maybe is work for the future. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, excellent. That's excellent. I remember when I was translating for Drupal Rinpoche in Samiling some years ago, and he was talking, or maybe it wasn't in Samiling, it could have been to the retreaters, the people in long-term retreat. But he said, one thing I've noticed with retreaters, the good ones, the ones who really are getting somewhere, says they're there, they're doing sort of the year 2, year 3 in retreat. They're doing these advanced practices, they're doing breath work, yoga work, channel work, inner heat, all these things. Not too successfully. And he said they start to really wonder, why isn't this working? Because we see in the great life stories of the Karmapas and Gampopa what happens when it works, the Milarepa. So why isn't it working? And then they realize that although they're doing Vajrayana technique, he says they realize their bodhicitta is not strong enough. Their loving care for beings, their real understanding of the bodhisattva mindset is not enough. And then they start working on that. And it helps. But then once they really look into how much of a bodhisattva am I, like thought by thought, minute by minute through the day, how much of a bodhisattva mind is there, or a samsaric mind? Once they start to really look into that, and he said they start wondering, have I really taken refuge? Because although I've taken refuge, how much do I believe in Buddha? What do I really know about what Buddha really is? And how can I long as a bodhisattva to be Buddha when I'm not really savored? What was it that Buddha did and achieved? And the Dharma, all the teachings that help us. So then he says they go back to taking refuge. And then he says, they think, well, how come that even this basic thing of placing my whole heart and trust in the refuges hasn't been that powerful? It's because I never really did the 4 ways of changing the mind. I never really thought about how precious a human life is, about impermanence, about the power of karma and suffering. So he said, then that's really good, because in some way it's bad news. I've gone all this way, I'm in retreat, I'm 3 years in retreat, and now I've got to go back to the very basics. But he said, that's the real start of the path. And that's when then the practices all start to work. And I think it's very, very true. It's very true.
I think your quote from Milarepa was really good. I've written that down separately because it's a very helpful condensation and focus for practice from now on, really.
Yeah. At one point, I printed out a little visiting card with the 6 one-liners on it. I think I need to do more of those. I'm not traveling anymore, so I've got no one to give them to. Never mind. Okay, so next week we start with forbearance. See you then. Bye-bye, everybody.
Cheers, Ken. Thanks a million, Ken.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
With love, bye.